Hi, this is Dr. Kelly back again on part 3 on dairy, and we just got finished talking about the big deal that bovine casomorphin 7 has on the body, and here's why. For one thing, we do know it has the capacity to pass through the blood-brain barrier, and this is a very tremendous shield for the brain for toxins. And given the fact it does have morphine in it, it is in fact a respiratory suppressor. Now, there is some soft science to suggest that babies drinking cow's milk may have a greater chance for SIDS, given the fact it does pass through the blood-brain barrier. We do know for a fact that women who breastfeed have lesser chance of SIDS. So this is likely a very complicated issue, and I bring it up simply because it's informational and important to consider. One thing we do know, however, is BCM7 absolutely challenges our colon, and it can cause irritable bowel disease and syndrome and Crohn's disease and colitis and diverticulosis and diverticulitis, a bunch of things that ultimately mean we are not absorbing our nutrition. We'll get to that in just a moment. But of import is that BCM7 has been linked to child disease of diabetes type 1, which is essentially an autoimmune disorder affecting the pancreas. It's very interesting to see that children who are drinking cow's milk have a greater proclivity for development of diabetes type 1 down the road. So it is a big deal. When we talk about the effect it has on the colon, you don't want to just give up, but recognize the fact that it does lead to absorption challenges. And when you're not absorbing things, when you put something in your mouth, you expect it to get into the cells. When that's not happening, the digestive issues will lead to malnutrition, which ultimately leads to the lack of ability to heal, and we're going to lose the oxidative battle that's constantly ongoing. Some of you may experience it as inability to lose weight. The body is in a state of chronic stress, and this inflammation that is present from the BCM7 is causing problems. And we don't want to just lightly touch on type 1 diabetes because it'd be devastating for a child's future. So it's very important to take into account the effect that this BCM7 may be having on our body. But here's the good news. There are a couple ways to handle this. I'm going to talk about the first way first, which makes sense, and then the second way we'll talk about on the next set of slides. But the first strategy is simply this: to buck up and do 30 days of no dairy, and then on the 31st day, introduce it again and see how you feel. Does it change your pain? Have you dropped some weight? Is your sinus congestion less? Are your bowels better? Are you less constipated? And this is how I recommend to my patients for dairy substitution. Instead of milk, do nut milks like almond and rice milk. Now you'll notice I've not put soy milk on here because of the genetic modification and the challenge therein. Cheese is a tough one. There's really no good tasting cheese. I will say goat cheese has less casein, but cheese is a tough one when you're trying to reduce dairy. Ice cream, you can replace that with ice cream that's made from coconut milk, and on the market there's something called Coconut Bliss that does taste a lot like ice cream and doesn't have the challenge of the BCM7. Now, if you're a butter lover, recognize that butter really is the fat in the cow. Some of it happens to get into the milk along with some of the other milk solids. But when you take the milk solids out of butter, what's left is ghee. And you can buy this in the grocery store. It's called clarified butter, and it tastes a lot like butter because it is butter without the milk solids. It doesn't spread as easily and it's harder. But nonetheless, you can use that when you're trying to get dairy out of your diet. And lastly, yogurt. Probably the best tasting substitute for cow's milk yogurt is coconut milk yogurt, and it also does give you that good acidophilus. But as I mentioned, there's two ways to deal with this challenge. One is just to buck up and try reducing the dairy in your diet, getting rid of it for 30 days, and then reintroduce it to see if you feel better. But there's another way to consider, and we're going to talk about that in the next series of slides. So hold on.